Experts warn of extremism thriving on social media apps.
President Trump warning parents about the dangers of social media and the possibility of their kids being radicalized online.
What's interesting about this stuff?
What would you say to parents?
What's interesting about this stuff is that, like, there is truth to this, but not in the way that they're presenting it. There's truth to this, as we all know. We're all online. We know what it looks like. We see the radicalization that takes place. The issue is they're once again using a real problem in an effort to suppress leftist dissent. Okay? That is precisely what they're going to do. They're hammering on this issue. And for a lot of normies, what they're thinking about is like a lot of the right-wing radicalization that takes place and a lot of the right-wing violence that takes place, but they're bracketing it all under the banner of Antifa violence and Antifa radicalization. This is a very dangerous prospect for free-flowing communication, freedom of dissent, freedom of information, and they are absolutely going to come after anyone and everyone that has ever experienced or ever exhibited any kind of discontent towards the administration. 100%.
Parents who are worried about kids getting deep into these holes on the internet, spending too much time gaming.
They should be worried.
The online social network Discord, which allows children 13 and up to join, has recently been linked to numerous crimes and child suicides. And we are now learning the suspected Charlie Kirk assassin appeared to confess to the killing on Discord. Joining me now to talk about the dangers that platforms like Discord expose our children to is the founder and CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, Imran Ahmed. Thank you so much for being here. How vulnerable is every child in America right now if they are on sites like Discord?
Well, good morning, Todd. Platforms like Discord and, frankly, lots of other social media platforms, the problem that we have is that whereas they have rules, Discord itself prohibits violent extremism. It includes promoting or organizing violent extremist ideologies or acts. They just aren't enforcing their rules. And as a result, people are getting hurt.
The National Center on Sexual Exploitation, the fact that they have to put out a statement on this tells you everything, saying the following: Discord is a hot spot for dangerous interactions and deep fakes. This platform is popular.
Once again, this is a complex issue. Okay? This is a complex issue because this is not incorrect. It's true. What they're talking about is true. And it happens on Roblox. It happens on Discord. It happens on all these platforms. But the reason why Fox News is covering this should ring some alarm bells, okay? It's a red flag. Why is Fox News covering this? It's because they're going to use this not in an apolitical and real way to try and combat like active radicalization that's taking place or sexual exploitation that takes place on these platforms, but they're doing this in a way to attack any kind of left value being demonstrated on any of these platforms. Okay? This is not even a political issue in general, but if you were to look at this from the lens of politics, obviously, if you are even remotely familiar with political violence and domestic terror that takes place on U.S. soil, and if you're not like a brain-broken boomer who believes what they see on Fox News and assumes that it's all left-wing violence, you already know this is mostly a problem of far-right extremist radicalization that takes place on Telegram, on Discord, all these other places. Okay? There's also, here's another great example of like what internet speak looks like when normies get a hold of it. Does anyone have that Rolling Stone article? The one I'm talking about with Jim Morrissey? Like that people would, that like brain broken people online say with regular frequency, when normies interact with it in an environment of heightened tension, they don't understand that it's like a meme at all, because why should they? It's just an insane thing for someone to write out. The story I'm talking about here is that Morrissey cancels upcoming shows due to credible threat on his life. Okay? Now, the article headline in and of itself, especially given the environment that we're in right now, comes across like a very serious, very sincere threat. But I'm going to read to you the language used in this credible death threat, and you will very quickly, most likely recognize, depending on how internet brain broken you are, that this is something that you see all the time online. It's something that I receive all the time online. Okay. So English singer-songwriter Morrissey is canceling his upcoming concerts this weekend due to a credible threat on his life. In recent days, there has been a credible threat on Morrissey's life. Out of an abundance of caution for the safety of both the artist and the audience. Oh, it's not Jim. Sorry. It's not Jim Morrissey. All right, whatever. The former member of the Smiths is outset of his new tour, most recently played a date on September 16th. Okay. The cancellation comes weeks after a 26-year-old Ottawa man, Noah Castellano, was arrested and charged with threats to cause death or bodily harm for threatening Morrissey on the social app Blue Sky. On September 4th, Castellano, under an account titled Guy Who Gets Shot in the Head 100,000 Times a Day, posted, Stephen Patrick Morrissey, when you perform at TD Place here in Ottawa next week on the evening of September 12th, 2025 at about 9 p.m., I will be present at the venue in the audience, and I will attempt to shoot you many times and kill you with a very large gun that I own illegally. Do you see what I mean? It's this hyper-specific threat when a member of law enforcement sees this hyper-specific threat, they understandably take it seriously. But when you actually see like the name of the account and the way that they're posting, you realize like this is the classic case of like a Fed poster who thinks that this is funny. Okay? You should not joke like this in general. And you especially should not be writing shit like this at all, right? But it's, for me, I understand exactly the fear that Morrissey had and why law enforcement took action. Because this is like, for the last, I would say, 3 years of my life, this is all of my replies. Do you see what I mean? Like, this is straight up all of my replies, pretty much. Which is why I'm very aware of this kind of like internet speak. But normies are not. Normies look at this and go, what the is this? In any case, that's what I mean about, that's what I mean when I say like there's obviously like real credible threats, and then also like online posters thinking they're being edgy. And for the record, if we didn't know the actual account name, Guy Who Gets Shot in the Head 100,000 Times a Day, without that context, this still would certainly read not as like an edgy poster, but a credible death threat. But when you actually see the name of the account, you're like, oh, this person is doing a bit, an insane bit, and perfectly understandable that it would be prosecuted, but it's clearly like a poster. Having said that, the reason why I'm mentioning is because many of you in here have probably encountered this kind of poster online, like the edgy guy. But understandably, from the perspective of law enforcement, they don't think that this is funny. Give me a sub. Very credible thread. Hilarious joke for Hasan. Amazing joke. Stop diminishing themselves for being themselves. Nazi-ass Twitch streamer Hasan. See, there you go. Like, who finds this kind of edgy humor funny? Sam Hyde fans. Like, what do you think? People who rush to basically post like the same bass boosted Sam Hyde memes in the aftermath of any sort of mass shooting to be like, this is the shooter. Like the guys that are 45 years old who think that like peak comedy. You know what I mean? A lot of dudes like this online. So yeah, I don't think boomers are aware of what people get up to on the internet is what I mean. I don't think boomers and normies are aware of like the way people communicate online and like the type of shit that they do. Like, I'll give you another example. J-Schlatt posting, right? Something is going to happen on insert date to Donald Trump. That's like a common meta on Twitter. People do that all the time. J-Schlatt does it all the time. People celebrate it. People laugh about it. But it's like an inside joke that hundreds of thousands of people are aware of. But to the outside, that could be seen as like a death threat. Do you see what I mean? Because they don't know, they don't get it, they don't understand. So when it's the same for all the internet brain poison people in here, like, it's when your joke leaves the intended audience, okay? And I suspect that a lot more of that is going to take place now that people are consistently talking about how, like, online radicalization is taking place on these platforms, and we must take a extra careful look at it, okay?
With predators seeking to groom kids and with creeps looking to create, trade, or find sexually abusive content of children and unsuspecting adults. So I heard what you said in your answer there, that these platforms are not enforcing their own rules. Is there anything that can be done through the courts to say, hey, you need to step up, enforce your rules, and maybe even our rules, because you're not doing a good job protecting our kids?
Well, Todd, that's precisely the problem. Look, any company in America today.
Do you think Discord is worse than Twitter? No platform is worse than Twitter at, like, active radicalization. Twitter is basically 4chan and 8chan combined, normalizing that kind of behavior, normalizing doxing, normalizing all the shit that people used to do on those, like, anonymous forums online. They do it in broad daylight, and they do not get regulated at all. Telegram is obviously the worst of the worst out of all of these platforms. It's the least moderated one. But honestly, I would say that Twitter's role as being one of the major social media platforms and allowing that kind of shit to take place has made things worse all around the internet.
Can be sued if it causes harm to you. Apart from social media companies, they hide behind a 1980s law, a 1990s law, Section 230, to escape responsibility.
Yeah,
and
this guy wants to repeal Section 230, which is devastating. They want complete control over the flow of information online, okay? That's what they want. The internet, for better or for worse, is one of the only remaining places where there's, like, free flow of communication, okay? And I say better or for worse because that democratization of the media has obviously led to people like myself gaining prominence, having massive platforms. But that's also created a misinformation landscape that makes people go insane. I don't know what the best solution is to any of this stuff, but I do realize that additional controls, especially in the hands of a government like this one, is terrifying. Truly terrifying. It's like people talk about the Chinese firewall, right? They talk about the Chinese firewall and they're like, oh, the Chinese government controls every piece of, there's mass surveillance on the Chinese internet. Okay? This is the American government taking the initiative to do the same.
It's a very odd law. It's special treatment for these companies. It's a get out of jail free card that nobody else gets. And whereas, Discord used to be the worst for moderation, but the truth is all the other platforms are racing to strip away the safeguards which stopped extremism from thriving.
Just quickly, before we let you go, do you think parents should just ban their kids from going on these sites entirely?
Look, I'm a parent too, and my wife said to me the other day that, 10 years ago, we worried about our kids being shot in a school shooting. I live in Washington, D.C. I worry about this every day. And she said, but now we worry that our kid might turn out to be the school shooter. And that's because these platforms are simply unsafe for young people while they remain ungoverned spaces where extremism thrives.
Just want to get this in here. Discord has been cooperating with the FBI investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination. A spokesperson saying Discord has said that an internal investigation found no evidence that the suspect planned this incident or promoted violence on Discord. So we will be watching. Imran Ahmed, thank you so much. An important warning for parents. Like you said, didn't worry about this 10 years ago. Got to worry about it now. Thanks so much, sir.
The irony is, if these guys knew any better, they would recognize that there are plenty of instances where Discord has played a role. Like, that's the irony, is that it's not in this one, and these guys don't know any better, and they're boomers, so they think like, oh, we got him. He was on Discord talking to his trans lover or whatever, not realizing that this is not even the case to build around. If you want to prosecute Discord, I don't want to give him any, I don't want to give him any advice on this regardless, though, because once again, their interest here is not to Their interest here is not to actively tackle radicalization online. Their interest here is to silence dissent online against the administration, against the State Department. You speak out against Israel, you're cooked. We're already seeing this happen with TikTok. Okay? The reason why TikTok was forcibly sold was because they did not like that the Chinese controlled application and its algorithms actually allowed a free flow of communication. And unlike all the other platforms, that led to a 50-50 parity on whichever kind of ideological message was seen on the algorithms. Every other website has a majority share of right-wing sentiment. Every single other one. There are liberal and nonpartisan assessments on this. You can go look at it if you want. There's like a Pew Center research study on it too. And I do think that their understanding of what it is to be a liberal or a leftist commentary versus what it is to be right-wing commentary is obviously going to be a little out of whack. But the reason why they actively went after TikTok was because it was the only social media platform where there was almost a 50-50 split on whichever ideological leaning you saw. Every other website, it's right-wing majority. Okay? And I'm talking about the major sites. I'm not talking about Blue Sky. Okay? Blue Sky is irrelevant. Having said that, the real reason why they also wanted to come after TikTok was because Palestine. That's it. That is literally the reason. And it's not my assessment. It's not speculation. They openly stated it. Mitt Romney said the quiet part out loud. Jonathan Greenblatt, shortly after October 7, said the quiet part in a private conversation that was leaked to the media. That's it. That's it. They were like, the children are actually seeing the truth about what is taking place in Gaza, and we have to put an end to it. They hate Israel now. TikTok is the reason. We have to deal with it. And Democrats and Republicans alike already had an interest in stopping TikTok to begin with. Okay? They already wanted to stop TikTok. They already were fearful. And they presented numerous other reasons. Like they were like, oh, the Chinese government is like stealing all your data, which is such a laughable avenue of attack. The Chinese government is surveilling everyone over it. Again, another laughable avenue of attack. The real reason was because TikTok's algorithm is crack cocaine. It's the most successful algorithm. Okay? It's the most addictive algorithm. And therefore, and not only is it the most successful and most addictive algorithm, it also was not controlled by the American State Department in any meaningful capacity. They had to put an end to that. That is the reason why they wanted to either ban TikTok altogether or forcibly sell it to an American. Yes, of course, everything is stealing our data. And also, if China wants to take our data, they could just like go to a data broker, okay, instead of like running TikTok as an application. In the last month, the war in Gaza has become an inescapable facet of the public consciousness. As a new surge of images of Palestinian children, their faces impossibly sunken, their limbs reduced to skin and bone, flooded the internet. This is Sarah Jong, okay, on The Verge. As the pictures became ubiquitous, the outcry became louder than ever. These conditions of extreme deprivation are not new. In November 2024, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Ben Netanyahu for using starvation as a method of war. Nevertheless, the situation now is piercing the mainstream in a way that official charges of war crimes could not. Maybe it was the video of guards at a food aid distribution site using stun grenades, pepper spray, and live ammunition on crowds of hungry Palestinians. Or perhaps it was the news 2 weeks later that 20 Palestinians had been killed, mostly by trampling, when a crowd at a distribution site panicked as stun grenades were used on them. Or possibly it was the open letter from the European news agency AFP, warning that its final remaining journalists in Gaza were at imminent risk of death by starvation. Since AFP was founded in 1944, we have lost journalists in conflict. Some have been injured, others taken prisoner, but none of us can ever remember seeing colleagues die of hunger, the agency wrote. But most likely it was the images of children. Children far too weak to move their wasted bodies, rendered at screen resolutions that should not exist in the same era of history as their inhumane malnourishment. These horrific pictures are viral. Even President Donald Trump, who continues to back Netanyahu, has seen them. Some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it, and you can't fake that, he said on television. The upswell of photographs from Gaza is surreal. The heightened attention resembles similar inflection points in the past in which international scrutiny came to focus on an atrocity inflicted on children abroad. Think of the intentionally viral campaigns like Coney 2012, protesting, among other things, the use of child soldiers, or hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, decrying the 2014 abduction of 276 schoolgirls by Boko Haram in Nigeria. But these priors are also distinct from the virality of this moment. Both Coney 2012 and hashtag Bring Back Our Girls were attempts to solicit American intervention. Although there is, in the short term, a demand for American action in Gaza, the immediacy of the crisis just barely obscures the paradox at play. Israel has successfully blockaded Gaza by land, sea, and air since 2007, controlling how much food and water can enter the region. It has maintained military supremacy and bolstered its cutting-edge defenses using American military aid and American-manufactured arms. The ultimate plea from Gaza is for American non-intervention. The U.S. has had a hand in the starvation of Gaza, and in that sense, the sum total of these images of Gazan children, despite no single photograph breaking free and coming to the forefront of the onslaught, is most analogous to the Vietnam War's napalm girl photo. One of the persistent myths of American history is that the terror of war, a 1972 photograph of a weeping, running 9-year-old Vietnamese girl covered in a blazing napalm, changed American sentiment and brought an end to the Vietnam War, a conflict that had been made possible with American dollars, American bombs, and eventually American soldiers. I too subscribed to this belief at one point, but in truth, a poll in 1971, the year prior, found that 61% of Americans already believed it had been a mistake to send soldiers to Vietnam. A poll in early 1973, ahead of the Paris Peace Accords, saw no rise in that number. The napalm girl photograph was never a catalyst. It was a symbol of a tide that had already turned. The myth of the napalm girl is powerful because it tells us a story about the American conscience that is far more palatable than the reality. We would like to think that Americans only tolerated war so long as they did not viscerally comprehend its horror. The truth is a little more complex. Photography, videography, journalism, and mass communication were important to the American anti-war movement. But raw information on its own has never been the on/off switch of morality. To comprehend horror is not the same as rejecting it. Regardless, governments certainly believe that images speak to the conscious in a way that can shake the foundations of power itself. And I do think that if there weren't brave Palestinians every single day communicating their own demise, and sometimes their last courageous act, that many Americans would be still oblivious, and many Americans still are. Some of those Americans have seen the images and refuse to recognize the humanity of those who are being slaughtered en masse with American weapons, American bullets, American bombs in the hands of the Israeli occupying forces. But many Americans are simply oblivious to it because they don't see it. Okay? That's precisely the reason why they want to stamp out this kind of visibility. Because let's be real, if it wasn't for the Palestinians who were capable of showing the truth about what Israel is doing to them, the American perspective on Israel's wanton death and destruction campaign as genocide would not have shifted so dramatically over the course of the last 2 years. Okay? I truly believe it. Regardless, governments certainly believe that images speak to the conscience. It is why Richard Nixon was caught on the Oval Office tapes furiously coping about the terror of war, musing about how surely it must be fake. It is why the United States instituted a blanket ban on photographs of flag-draped coffins of soldiers returning from the battlefield from 1991 to 2009. It is why IDF spokesperson Effie Defrin has told reporters that most of the images of starving children were fake distributed by Hamas. It's why China still censors a photograph of a man with 2 plastic bags standing in front of a line of tanks in Tiananmen Square. It's why China banned TikTok in Hong Kong during the 2020 democracy protests. And it is why the United States did what it did in March 2004. 6 months after October 7th massacre of 1,195 people by Hamas and the commencement of Israel's retaliatory war in Gaza, upwards of 30,000 Palestinians, including 13,000 children, had been killed. America's response to all of this was, of all things, an attempt to ban TikTok. Now, obviously, those numbers are not correct at this stage, and they weren't even correct on August 19th. But what she's talking about is like, what she's talking about there is like initially, okay? The estimation has gone up by quite a bit. The latest numbers I had seen floating around were around 680,000 or something. Is like the total number of casualties, including the dead and the gravely injured and the missing. Trump was the first to propose a ban on TikTok as early as 2020, ultimately signing an executive order to force the sale of the Chinese-owned video platform. This effort petered out for a number of reasons, including probable unconstitutionality, Trump getting sort of distracted by a bunch of stuff, and then Trump leaving office. The Biden administration withdrew the executive order, but fear of TikTok lingered as a bipartisan issue. In 2022, Representatives Mike Gallagher and Raja Krishnamurti introduced a sell or ban bill designed to wrest control of the platform from Chinese parent company ByteDance. Okay? But the pivotal turn here that gave the initiative to every single Democrat and Republican alike in Congress to finally make this decision, to finally pull the trigger, was Israel. Okay? Israel already had a pervasive influence network in the form of the Israel lobby that spans all the way from AIPAC to numerous other advocacy groups. And they went all systems go to try to push for the ban of TikTok. And the reason for why was because of TikTok's lack of interest in regulating flows of information at the behest of the American State Department or in the direction of Israel. TikTok, for this reason, is probably one of the most effective soft power mechanisms that the Chinese government holds, for the record. But it is very clear that China, in the interest of trades maxing and continuing to play nice with the United States of America, clearly is willing to tweak the algorithm in a way that favored Donald Trump before the election, and even tweak the algorithm further in a way to suppress anti-Israel sentiment on the platform. It's already happening. They already hired for TikTok USA an anti-Semitism czar, a hate speech czar, right? That is already tackling and regulating and moderating all of the content creators on the platform that have spoken out against Israel, punishing them with 3 strikes instantly and permanently banning them with no hopes of recovering those accounts whatsoever. Deleting comments and things of that nature. It's already happening right now, and it's going to only get worse for domestic issues as well. This is why I always stress the importance for many people to understand that Palestine is the inflection point. Okay? It is the intersectionality of a lot of harm that we actually see all around us, and it's a warning sign for many things to come. Just as I said over and over again, under the Biden administration, when college campus protesters were being smeared and were being attacked and being arrested, 3,500 peaceful protesters on campuses were arrested for the crime of exercising their constitutionally protected right to demonstrate against a foreign nation that was conducting a genocide. They were right on the morals, and they were right to do what they were doing, and it was perfectly legal, and yet they were arrested. Campus presidents were called in to be humiliated by Republicans and Democrats alike. An anti-Semitism problem was concocted out of thin air on college campuses. It was not that there wasn't an anti-Semitism problem prior or an anti-Semitism problem on college campuses at all. I'm not saying that. Of course there was an anti-Semitism problem. There's a bigotry problem everywhere in American life. And college campuses certainly also experienced this as well. Having said that, this was not about anti-Semitism even for a little bit. This was always about weaponizing anti-Semitism to censor anti-Zionism. That has always been the name of the game. And the Democrats, who were also invested at the directive of Joe Biden and also at the behest of their corporate benefactors and the Israel lobby, played ball with this false assertion. They made it seem as though this was a real issue that was taking place. And they even got a bunch of scalps in the process. They got a bunch of college presidents and Ivy League institutions to be fired. Think about that, for not being sufficiently Zionist. Can you imagine a world in comparison to the average person's opinion on Israel? You explain to them like the Harvard president was not sufficiently pro-Israel. That's an insane assessment. It's just completely ridiculous. But it doesn't matter. It worked. And then part of the problem of the Democratic Party's inability to address some of the resentment, some of the anger that people felt, turning a blind eye to all of the material harm that was taking place and turning a blind eye to the very reasonable and just demands that people were making in terms of like stopping this genocide, which we had every power to do so and still do, for the record. That led the Democrats to lose the election in part, right? Donald Trump came into office and he took advantage of all of the fake concern, the concern trolling that was built in. And he took it to the next step. First, by presenting this as immigration enforcement, because the State Department does have awesome power over who gets to come into the country and who doesn't, who gets to get their visas revoked and who doesn't. So he used that unilateral enforcement mechanism that he has to silence opposition to Israel. Many people still didn't care. And then that censorship regime has officially evolved in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk death to censor liberal dissent as well, moderate dissent, timid points of discontent, disagreement. Now liberals are starting to pay attention. It's not that they are massive Jimmy Kimmel heads. I don't think Jimmy Kimmel has that broad of an audience. I don't think he's that popular. He's just a prestige actor for one of these legacy publishers, right? It's not that he has like this organically built parasocial fan base. But for a lot of liberals, this was a wake-up call for them because they refused to see the writing on the wall for the longest time. They actually actively championed the censorship regime, perhaps, maybe because they thought it was a spoiler for the Democratic Party's electoral chances, or maybe because they simply didn't care, maybe because they loved Israel, right? But basically, we are not at the end stage of this censorship regime, okay? That's not how fascism works. Fascism continues to grow the out-group and continues to diminish the number and the size of the in-group. We are at the beginning stages of this censorship regime. So people need to recognize that. People need to reconsider their stances from before. So if they think, for example, right now, if many liberals still think, oh man, I don't really care about TikTok, or I don't really care about Discord, or I don't really care about this or that. Who cares if like there's an anti-Semitism czar who is engaging in censorship? They don't realize that that is a constant expansion of the permission structure. It starts with edge cases. It starts with it starts with what broader society would just not care about or would consider to be a reasonable mechanism of enforcement. But it doesn't stop there. This is why explaining this evolution of the censorship regime is very important. Okay? This is how it works. But make no mistake, TikTok was always slated to be censored. But what actually was the straw that broke the camel's back, what gave Democrats and Republicans alike the final push, the interest in doing this sell or ban provision, which is, once again, most likely unconstitutional. Not that it matters. The Supreme Court is obviously completely captive to the interests of the far right in this country. Having said that, what gave it the final push was Israel. Here's Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the Apartheid Defense League, speaking to the Israeli Knesset.
This deadly seriously. Pushing extremists off Wikipedia might not seem equal to the challenge of pushing Hezbollah north of the Litani River. Capturing TikTok might seem less meaningful than holding on to Mount Hermon. Libelous tweets certainly might seem less deadly than missiles from Yemen. But this is urgent because the next war will be decided based on how Israel and its allies perform online as much as offline.
Yep. Here he is stressing the importance of capturing every single media outlet and communication platform to ensure that anti-Israel sentiment is curbed. Okay? He said it himself. And once again, even if you are oblivious to the wanton slaughter, even if you think that this is just a unfortunate consequence of the collateral damage, this genocide, even if you cast that aside, trust me, I mean, one, you shouldn't do that. That's incredibly immoral. I don't know how you can be so monstrous. But even if you cast that aside, understand that it will inevitably happen to something you do care about. It won't stop with Jimmy Kimmel, for example. So we have to try and stop this right now, because every single day that goes by it will become harder and harder to organize online. It'll be harder and harder to get the word out because their goal is to stop these kinds of messaging networks from helping people organize directionally against this administration. That is the ultimate goal. It is to make it easier to develop a authoritarian fascist government. Discontent is one of the many tools that we have at our disposal. Communicating with one another is one of the many tools that we have at our disposal. That's the reason why they want to take it out. That's the reason why they want to control it.